Hello, everyone. Welcome to this edition, Friday edition of Weekend Waypoints, and a special Friday edition at that because it is opening day of SEC play in college baseball. No longer do we have to do things like look at a team's really good stats and say, well, you have to consider the competition, or, well, they really haven't played anybody. That changes starting this weekend with a gauntlet of 10 weeks of SEC play begins. We are officially on the highway to Hoover, at which point we will take an exit to the road to Omaha after that. Really excited to get going with this weekend's games. And lock in on it and not be not be wondering if we're going to get anything interesting. Every weekend of non-conference play gave us something interesting, even if we didn't totally expect it. But man, it'll be nice to have best on best in the SEC finally. News roundup before we get to Friday games, and it is largely a pitching health centered news roundup for better and for worse, unfortunately. But no AJ Russell in Tennessee's rotation, still going with AJ Causey, Drew Beam, and a TBA, which has been a staff day for the most part. No Nate Dome for Mississippi State. That's a biggie. He was, had been so good, and combined with Steven and Senja had given them being Mississippi State, incredible work the first 4 weeks. Not having him is a huge blow. If in fact he's going to be out for a while, we're still waiting on something definitive there. But him not being in the rotation this weekend obviously is a little bit of a red flag. But we'll have to wait and see. On the better side of the ledger, Joseph Gonzalez going to throw this weekend for Auburn. He's set to start on Sunday. If you have not read it, at SEC Extra, Mark, I say we like I did anything. Mark posted a story on what Auburn had been working with Gonzalez on when they skipped him last weekend, and there was concern it was an injury thing, and understandable because that started to feel a little bit like last year where it was Gonzalez got pulled, and then it was always like the can was getting kicked down kicking the can down the road a week or 2 weeks. And then it was all these fits and starts on whether he was going to actually come back. And then he never did. So I don't blame anybody for being a little bit nervous about the way that went down. But supposedly, it was more about, his velocity and command wasn't quite there. And they started looking at why and found out that his stride length was not what it should be or what it used to be. And so they just spent the time off fixing that, and they're happy with where he's at right now. So they're going to give him a go on Sunday. And I think it's just kind of a case of, obviously Auburn got pushed by Austin Peay more than a lot of folks anticipated, but going into the weekend, you'd rather skip Joseph Gonzalez against Austin Peay and work through what you need to work through with him than have him get lit up against Vanderbilt this weekend or whoever down the road in SEC play. So better to maybe try to, whatever that saying is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, basically try to cut it off and try to fix what needs fixing and then go from there, as opposed to just trying to plow through it and fix it on the fly. So we'll see how it goes. Obviously he'll be on the mound Sunday for Auburn. It was a big midweek, a big Tuesday specifically. There wasn't much on Wednesday, but the big game was FSU over Florida. Some of the pitching woes continue for Florida. I said this on the weekend preview show with Runes and Aaron last night, but I think, and on the podcast earlier this week with Jacob Rudner talking about the Florida Gators on Highway to Hoover, like I think there's as much concern about the bullpen as there is about the rotation, because you can look at the struggles of Cade Fisher and Liam Peterson, and actually it's kind of like an ink blot test. You can see whatever you want to see. Like, yes, the ERAs aren't good, but they both have good peripheral numbers in a lot of cases. So you kind of just wonder if, hey, let's give this some time and that stuff will all kind of smooth out. So we'll see, obviously. But I as we stand today, I'm like a little more worried about their bullpen. Ryan Slater has been excellent. Brandon Neely's not been particularly good, but I'm going to, at least for now, just assume that they're going to get him going at some point. He's just too talented, too good not to, in my estimation. But beyond that, it's been a lot of freshmen. And hey, if your best bullpen guys end up being freshmen and that works for you all throughout the year, that's great. But there is the freshman wall. There's how do they deal with SEC atmospheres? How do they deal with all of that? And so that's actually more of a concern for me right now, is in the bullpen. I think we saw that against FSU because it's, a midweek game. So you're doing a little more of a staff day kind of thing. And they lose that one 12-8. Now FSU might be in Omaha level team. They certainly look like it so far. So maybe in the end, this loss doesn't mean much, but certainly you always want to beat your rival. And Florida has largely dominated that rivalry series with Florida State. So that's always a bummer when that happens. But we'll learn a lot more this weekend. Florida's got A&M at home. Certainly that's going to be a test for their pitching. That A&M lineup is extremely good. Vanderbilt got a big win over Indiana. And Georgia got a big win over Iowa in the midweek. Those are both quality wins over Big Ten teams. Although both Big Ten teams, this is not a Big Ten podcast or video, so I don't get too deep into it. Man, Indiana and Iowa, the two teams we thought would be winning the Big Ten, and they're taking lumps left and right. So it's kind of a struggle for those teams. Southern Miss, a win over Bama. No shame in that, obviously. Everybody watching this, whether you whether you live in the state of Mississippi or not, knows Southern Miss is good. So there's really no shame in that. But it was just a quality game on the schedule. But that's not going to be a harmful loss in the end for Bama, because Southern Miss their RPI is going to be fine. The quality of the team is going to be fine. And speaking of quality mid-major teams, Auburn over Troy, 8-2. Troy's playing a really aggressive schedule, and kudos to them. I think they really like their team, so they're being extra aggressive with who they played this year. That includes this game against Auburn at technically a neutral site. But coming away with the win is Auburn. And again, just much like Southern Miss, like that'll end up being a quality win. I don't know if Troy will end up being top 50 in RPI, but I'm very confident they'll be top 100 in RPI. And that's going to end up being a quality win. And because it's neutral site, they'll get a little extra bump in terms of RPI there. Okay, let's get into this weekend games, and good morning to everyone. I've seen the good morning messages on YouTube, Moonshine, vis-a-vis 16, and then, of course, Jeremy Scott on Facebook with his Roll Tide. And I agree with you, Jeremy. Yes, I hope that weather stays away this weekend and you guys get all the games in down there in Tuscaloosa for a good series that we will talk about a little bit more here in a second. Let me pull up the schedule for today. And it's nice now when I share the schedule with you guys that I don't have to scroll. It all fits on one page there. Basically, there's only 7 of these as opposed to 14 or more of these. If there was a double header or whatever, there'd be more than 14. So it is nice that it's only 7. We're now in the period of time when Friday games are going to be Friday night games, and that's the big bright lights of the SEC. That's what you want, big time atmospheres, and of course. Not every weekend will be this way because, as we've already talked about, weather is going to weather, and it is springtime in the Southeast, which, can be pretty wet, as I don't have to tell you guys, but it is what it is. So just massive series left and right here. It's a heck of a start. All the series kind of look big, with now we don't yet know who's not good, right? Like last year, I can't remember who Ole Miss played to start off SEC play last year, but we thought that that was a team that was going to be great. We love their lineup, and we thought they'd figure it out on the mound. And then of course their season goes the way it goes. So by the time May rolls around, we know, well, we don't really need to pay attention to Ole Miss right now, unless you're an Ole Miss fan and you just wanted to pay attention to it, although that must have been difficult. So that's part of it, is we just don't know who's not good yet. So that makes all these series look kind of enticing in various ways. But still, even with that, you've got Texas A&M and Florida. That's, a top 10 matchup there. We've got Tennessee and Alabama. That's 2 top 20 teams, top 15 teams, perhaps. I forget where we've got Alabama at the precise moment, but Auburn, Vanderbilt, ranked teams there. And then I'm kind of intrigued by LSU and Mississippi State. I talked about that one. I've talked about that one on radio a decent bit. I talked about it on the preview show for the big D1 baseball show with Aaron and Runes last night, because, Mississippi State without Dome, they're taking a step up. Can their pitching staff hold against LSU? But this LSU offense is not last year's LSU offense. But then on the flip side, this Mississippi State offense has been slow out of the gate, outside of Dakota Jordan, obviously. Dakota Jordan has been incredible, but he's basically carrying that offense on his back. And that's not something he can, that's one thing against the teams they've played. It's going to be quite another against LSU or any other SEC club, frankly. So that'll be interesting to see what gives there. Basically 2 offenses that aren't quite clicking, and then 2 pitching staffs, LSU that's been magnificent, and Mississippi State, which has been very good as well, if not, maybe not quite as impressive as LSU. So A lot on the docket today. Exciting stuff there to kick off SEC. The series of the weekend, Texas A&M at Florida. Sorry, I'm catching up on. Okay, I was catching up on comments there on YouTube. Shout out to Armstrong Grappling for jumping in. He says, excellent job on the SEC primers. That's another thing. If you all last week we posted 14 SEC primers, so one for each team. They're short, like you can probably get through it in 3 or 4 minutes at least, maybe faster than that. Just kind of setting the stage for where this team is at, what they've accomplished, what we still have questions about, things like that. So go check those out on the site if you've not already done so. You can get through them quick and get a real high level overview. Obviously, if you're a fan of that team, but I think they might even be more valuable if you're not a fan of the team you're looking at, because you might not know much about that team and you're just kind of like, just give me the bullet points on this team. And so that'll be helpful in that regard. Okay, series of the weekend, A&M at Florida. Mark Etheridge will be there. Stephen Schoch will be there. Obviously, they're two very different coverage styles, so they're not going to overlap too much there. But so we will have this series covered pretty thoroughly. If you're watching this, I'm sure you're following Mark Etheridge and Stephen Schoch on various social media channels, but make sure you're doing so because those guys will be on the scene in Gainesville. This is a little bit of a heat check for A&M's pitching staff, right? I mean, leading the nation in ERA, 2.01. That type of number will not hold up in SEC play. Just bank on that. But how good really are they, right? I mean, because Florida's offense presents a specific challenge. You can miss Florida's bats a little bit. They'll strike out a little bit, but they are so physical up and down the lineup. So they can really, if you're not good, if you're not locating, they can really make it a tough day for you on the mound. A&M's been up to the challenge. I'm really interested in Ryan Prager. He's kind of an interesting guy where he uses the slider more than the fastball. None of his stuff is eye-poppingly great. It's good. He's not a slop tosser by any stretch of the imagination. But he's the type of guy that if he doesn't locate it, he's not going to blow it by anybody by missing with his fastball. So he's going to have to be sharp for this offense, but he's been nothing but sharp so far. So I'm really fascinated to see how that goes. And I think for Florida, look, I mean, we talked about this up the top. Their pitching staff, even if I think it'll figure it out, like the pitching staff hasn't been as good as we thought it would be so far. And this is not the team. A&M is not the team you want to see rolling into town if you're trying to figure some things out on the mound, because their offense is just as good, if not better than Florida's. I mean, Florida has, Cags and Colby Shelton, but you can turn around with A&M and say, well, they have Jace Laviolette and Braden Montgomery, and Gavin Grohovac is on the rise. Ted Burton's been excellent, the transfer from Michigan. It's a deep lineup. So I think there's going to be some runs scored this weekend, but given the way A&M's pitching staff has performed, and given the talent on the Florida pitching staff, if they have a good weekend on the mound, like I think these two offenses could be a little bit more frustrated than they've been at any point this season. So that feels like something's got to give game. We're two good offenses, two pitching staffs that one has performed very well, one has extraordinary talent, and those are two different teams there, both capable of slowing down an offense. But man, these offenses are not going to be easy to slow down. And I also want to see what kind of attitude does Florida come out with, because it's not just that the pitching has been a little bit suspect. It's that it feels like they're sleepwalking a little bit. And maybe that's just my perception of it, because it never looks good when you're losing games, right? Nobody has good body language when you're losing games, but it does feel a little bit like they've been sleepwalking. So we'll see. I would imagine they'll come out with a different energy this weekend. It's first weekend of SEC play, and it's at home. If you can't, get up for that and have good body language for that, I'm not really sure what you're waiting on. So I suspect that'll be the case here. Okay, Friday's top pitching matchup. I'm going to go with Alabama's Ben Hess against Tennessee's AJ Causey down in Tuscaloosa. Ben Hess, especially with the Riley Quick injury, like his spot for Alabama continuing to be a true guy on Fridays for them is as important as anything else on that team right now. So that's big. And then with AJ Causey, I want to see, what does this look like against an offense that is performing as well as Alabama's? I think they've overperformed their talent, which is not to say I don't think they're talented, but they've overperformed it. We can agree on that. I mean, they're leading the league in batting average, and they've been incredibly physical. I think they have shown their offense is better than I think we thought it might be, But they're gonna be tested with AJ Causey. But also, how does AJ Causey perform here? This is his SEC debut. Let's not forget that. And a guy who's been really, really good and has really interesting stuff. It's not high end velocity, but man, everything he throws plays up. He's got a funky arm slot. It's everything moves. The fastball has arm side run, but he's got the changeup does too. But then he's got a 3,000 RPM slider going the other direction. So he's a tough matchup, but it's his SEC debut, and he's a guy that at Jacksonville State last year had good numbers, but not great numbers. So, is he just a better pitcher? That's possible. He's working with Frank Anderson now, one of the very best pitching coaches in the country. So it's possible he's just a better pitcher now. But it is also entirely possible that he'll get into SEC play and he'll have to make adjustments because the competition's just better there. So it's a good test for the Alabama offense. And on the flip side, if you're Ben Hess, you're just looking to mitigate a little bit, because I have a sneaking suspicion that this Tennessee offense, I think, is great. Full stop. I think I've talked about this before. I think there's a good chance this might be the deepest lineup that Tennessee's had under Tony, because they've probably got 12 or 13 guys they really want to play, and 12 or 13 guys that could get the job done. Because not only have they had the guys you expected to be stars, Christian Moore, Billy Amick, Blake Burke, but they've also gotten Robin Villeneuve, a JUCO transfer that we didn't know much about. He's been excellent. Like Dalton Bargo has been really good in a part-time role, right? Dean Curley as a freshman has come on strong and forced his way to the lineup every day. So, and now Ariel Antigua's back, right? Are coming back, getting back. So that they just kind of have actually gotten deeper as the season has gone on. So that's fascinating to me. And so if you're Ben Hess, like shutting this team down, even at home, is probably not on the table. You're just trying to mitigate and keep your team in the game, because this Tennessee offense might be the best one in the SEC, which is to say maybe the best one in the country. Second in the nation in home runs. First is Georgia, honestly, which surprises me. Charlie Condon has 13, so that's a good chunk of that, but that's still a lot of home runs for the rest of the lineup. So 39 of them, which would, even if you took Charlie Condon out, 39 home runs would put them among the leaders nationally. So that kind of surprises me, but Georgia has played a soft schedule for the most part, and even Georgia Tech doesn't pitch well. So, but anyway, that's side note there. But Tennessee's 49 home runs, second nationally. So, if the ball's jumping, that's a tough matchup there. But then again, so is the Alabama offense. Okay, quick plugs before I get out of here. I mentioned the SEC play primers for each team. So there's 14 of those out at SEC Extra. So you could probably get through all of those, real quick this morning if you really wanted to. Kindle also on the big site on d1baseball.com. Kindle did a larger, big picture SEC play primer that touches on a lot of wide ranging things. I mentioned Mark and Steven are going to be at UF. Mark will have something written from the game. I'm sure Steven will have all kinds of shenanigans on video, if nothing else. So make sure you're following them. David Seifert, our draft guy, is going to be at the Tennessee-Alabama series. So make sure you're following him, especially if you're interested in videos of guys. Like he'll always be taking videos of different guys' swings, different pitcher deliveries, and reporting on what he sees from that standpoint. So make sure you're following David Seifert as well. Aaron Fitt will be in the state of Mississippi. He's going to be at LSU, Mississippi State, and South Carolina Ole Miss at various points of the weekend. It's still kind of TBD on which days he'll be where. He's going to start in Oxford, finish in Starkville. It's just a matter of where he is Saturday, I guess. So, Oxford Friday, Starkville Sunday, Saturday, kind of a TBD. So if you're watching this, I'm sure you're following Aaron already, but make sure if you're a fan of one of the Mississippi schools, that you are following him for this weekend, because he will be providing coverage of those two series. Okay, everybody, that's it for today's episode. I'll be back tomorrow morning with a Friday recap, Saturday preview edition of Weekend Waypoints. I appreciate you guys joining me again. The numbers continue to grow. I'm glad first of all, I'm glad you guys enjoy this. I'm glad you find this helpful. I actually selfishly find it helpful because it kind of helps me focus in and set the table for my day of SEC baseball. So that's been helpful for me. I'm glad it's been helpful for you guys and you're enjoying it. So I appreciate you. whatever it is, if you're not following our social media accounts, do that. If you haven't followed our YouTube account, or press thumbs up or whatever they have you do on there, I don't know. Just make sure you're doing all that to support us. We appreciate you doing so. All right, everyone, enjoy the baseball. I hope it's wonderful. I'm sure it will be, and I'll talk to y'all tomorrow morning.